first step towards loyalty is trust. The path of ignorance is guided by fear. The wise man leads, the strong man follows. Our actions define our legacy. Every episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars begins with a phrase. Some of them are real, but most of them are just made up for the episode. Sometimes they are hilariously on the nose for what's about to happen, and sometimes they're more of a motif or a moral that the episode is trying to impart. These 4 quotes make up the 4 episodes of the Umbara arc, one of the most famous and one of the best arcs in the entire show. And is it just me, or is one of these things not like the others? The other 3 relate pretty directly to what the episodes are about, but this one, the wise man leads, the strong man follows. What does that mean? Does one want to be wise or strong in this scenario? Are we implying that one cannot be both wise and strong? Isn't both what most people would aspire to? There's something I find weirdly sinister about this phrase. It conjures up the image of, a shepherd herding a bunch of really hench sheep. It puts the wise man in a position of power and control over the strong. Is that the moral? In absence of any explanation I can find on the admittedly terrible to use these days internet, I'm going to need to find my own explanation. The Umbara arc covers a Republic invasion of the planet Umbara, home of the Umbarans, also known as the Shadow People. The 501st Clone Battalion, normally led by Anakin Skywalker, is put under the command of a new Jedi, Pong Krell, whose tactics and approach to battle are vastly different to trusty old Anakin. Krell doesn't much care for the value of an individual clone's life and favours a tactic of constant, overwhelming force. Just throw enough soldiers at the problem until the problem goes away. Casualties be damned. The 501st are able to succeed in spite of being sent to their death because of their continual ingenuity and refusal to listen to Krell's orders, which eventually results in 2 of them being sentenced to execution, although none of the clones except 1 are actually willing to go through with it. Eventually, Krell tips his hand too much by engineering a battle between 2 different battalions of clones, resulting in many deaths, which is when the clones turn on him and eventually execute him for his crimes. There is a good reason this arc is so highly regarded. Umbara is one of Clone Wars' most artistically stunning arcs. The use of colour and light on the shadowy planet is exquisite. Dark grey and blue battlefields and jungles lit up by strange bioluminescent tendrils, and glowing bolts shooting across the skies. The abstract and neon designs of the Umbaran technology. It all establishes this perfect, oppressive environment. This is a hostile place where death lurks around every corner. It's also the best arc that centres on the clones as the main characters, and does the best out of any of them of delineating the clones as separate individuals. With subtle distinctions in design, tattoos, hairstyles, even slight differences in their performance and how they're animated, and most importantly, in their attitudes. During production, the team used the clone triangle drawn up by showrunner Dave Filoni. Although their version looks like this, so I made a cleaner version. There's about 6 clones who make up the main cast, and each of them sits somewhere on this triangle. From the fiercely loyal and unquestioning Dogma, to the highly skeptical and intuitive Fives, to the just wants to get through the day attitude of Tup. The way the show can make these guys, who are all essentially the same guy, feel like distinct characters and true individuals is nothing short of remarkable, and it's absolutely essential to making these 4 episodes work.
Alright, listen up. We'll assemble the squads into 2 divisions. We'll move straight up this gorge towards the airbase at the far side. The casualties are going to be high.
Is Krell trying to get us killed?
You know, I wasn't sure that Krell was crazy before, but now I'm positive. We had to retreat from the capital because the general pushed a flawed strategy. Now this? I don't know. Could be fun. Well, I for one agree with the general's plan. We're running out of time and this is the best option.
You need to feel the value of these lives, to view them not as the disposable, replaceable soldiers that they're supposed to be, but as the living, breathing people they actually are. Krell is a bad guy because he doesn't value the lives of the clones. In fact, he is pretty explicitly racist towards them. He goes out of his way to address them by their numbers, a random string of digits that must have taken him hours to memorise, instead of just using their self-given, easier to remember and vastly preferred names. In fact, you know it's intentional because sometimes he forgets to do it. In the middle of a battle, he'll slip up and actually use their names, but when he's not distracted, it's always the numbers. Krell refuses to view the clones as real people. They are nothing more than tank-grown meat sacks bred for combat. So he finds the idea of them having names or having complaints about being sent to their death to be absurd. And the thing is, Krell is not alone in that rationale, and he's not entirely wrong either. Umbara often makes the top of those darkest Clone Wars episodes, or proof that the Clone Wars isn't a kid's show lists. And while it's true that it is a lot more violent in most episodes of the Clone Wars, with a lot more death and a lot more focus on the brutality of those deaths, that's not really what makes the episodes dark. What makes them dark is that it's the deepest that Clone Wars ever goes into the realities of war, in a way that previous seasons of the show would never really dare to do. Something that makes Clone Wars an especially interesting show is that there's always two layers you can engage with it. You can engage with it on the surface level, where the clones and the Jedi are the good guys fighting a battle against the evil separatists. Or you can view it with foreknowledge as a piece of in-universe propaganda. Every episode starts with an old-timey radio newscast introduction. And these intros always present things in a completely black and white way. The Republic is good, the separatists are evil.
Clone troopers unite! As war rages across the galaxy, the Republic's clone army strives for victory against the evil forces of the Separatists. Bravery, valor, unity, the lifeblood of victory on the battlefield and in space.
This is how you know that these introductions are not to be trusted. Within the wider Star Wars canon, the Clone Wars are an entirely engineered conflict, part of Palpatine's decades-long plan to declare himself Emperor and destroy the Jedi. The Republic and the Separatists are just two sides of the same coin. There is no moral high ground between them. Although if you really think about the politics of the Seppies for a second, you'll realise that they actually make a lot of good points, but that's a different conversation. The Clone Wars usually creates this moral high ground anyway because the Separatist leaders are transparently evil. Grievous is a cackling supervillain, Ventress is a witch, Count Dooku is a Sith Lord. Even the more minor Separatist leaders are usually portrayed as comically evil monster men. They also always fight with the droid army, an inhuman force built only for destruction. But Umbara is different. Umbara exposes the lie. Umbara is one of the only battles in the Clone Wars where the clones don't fight against droids. Instead, almost all of the combat is against the Umbarans. And that's really the main thing that makes the violence of the episode feel so much more brutal. Brutality against droids doesn't really mean anything. They're robots, they don't bleed, they don't even die. They can always be rebuilt again. The Umbarans are strange and alien, but not that strange and alien. They have very human-looking faces which their helmet designs leave completely open and exposed. There is no evil general of the Umbarans, no glimpse into their leadership at all. They don't even speak English. They yell in their own alien language. Without a villain, there's no clear reason why this fight is happening. The introduction to the first episode states nothing more than that the Republic is invading the planet because control of the system will give them a strategic advantage. Attentive viewers, though, will know that it's more complicated than that, because just a season previously, Umbara was part of the Republic. In fact, their senator was a minor villain pushing for an increase in military spending in a Padme story that's good. Actually, click the link in the card here. That arc ended with their senator being assassinated by another senator as part of her own personal vendetta, which is probably a pretty good signal for the Umbarans that the Republic is not very stable. The more you think about this, the more clear it becomes that the Umbarans are not the bad guys in this scenario. They're defending their home from a hostile invading army, but the clones gun them down and dehumanize them in exactly the same ways as they do with battle droids. Something that really stands out on a rewatch is shots like this.
No juice left in him either.
These episodes come shortly after the transition to Phase 2 helmets, which are clearly designed to look more menacing and more evocative of Stormtrooper helmets. They do not look, especially in shots like this, execution style, heroic, or like the good guys. The point is not that the clones are actually evil, the point is that war is so much more complicated than it's usually portrayed in this show. It's useful to contrast this invasion to another invasion from a previous season, the second Battle of Geonosis. In contrast to Umbara, these episodes have a clear villain in Poggle the Lesser, the guy who gave Dooku the plans for the Death Star in that one scene. The Republic is invading because they're trying to destroy droid factories, where they're also designing impenetrable super tanks. It's one of the only other battles where a lot of the combatants are not droids, but the Geonosians are creepy, obviously evil bugmen who literally infect people with brain worms. If you dig into this invasion, you'll find similar issues to Umbara, something which Rebels explores much later on. But the presentation of this battle is what's important. It's a game. Anakin and Ahsoka literally keep a running tally of how many droids they've destroyed. This is fun! This is war, sure, but it's also an adventure.
65, Skywalker.
Sorry?
My total. 65. So what do I win?
And people were defending this guy's honour during the Acolyte drama. This man is a war criminal.
We're almost through! Bring in the flamethrowers!
The clones also celebrate their victories on Umbara. The first half of the episode still has Anakin in command, which is there to set this baseline of expectations that can be shattered by Krell, but the portrayal of the battle is completely different. The opening sequence is pure battlefield chaos. The music cuts out to just show this extended sequence of conflict. A sea of soldiers running headlong into laser fire. A situation where it's clear that survival is much more about luck than it is about skill. This is not fun or an adventure. This is hell. As much as the reasons for the war are bad, you can still feel sympathy for the soldier sent into this absolute hellscape. Nobody should be required to do this, but it's their job. George Lucas has never been shy talking about the real-world influences of Star Wars. The prequel trilogy, for all their faults, have a very clear political angle. They are about the rise of fascism, and particularly the rise of American fascism. Lucas himself is quoted as once saying, "George Bush is Darth Vader. Dick Cheney is the Emperor." He's never been a man of subtlety, old George. Star Wars often has a bluntness to it, which makes its political analogies easy to follow, which is good because despite it all, this is a franchise for children. Lucas has always been very clear that the Vietnam War was a big inspiration for how the rebels and the Empire are portrayed in the original Star Wars.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
You can pretty clearly see those influences in the original trilogy if you're looking for them, but the Umbara arc is probably the closest that Star Wars has ever gotten to doing a direct homage to the Vietnam War. The setup of the war is very similar, with the invading Republic entering a hostile environment that they don't know, versus the natives of the land who have set traps and fight with guerrilla tactics that gives them an advantage over the invading army. Umbara's bioluminescent jungles are a sci-fi exaggeration of the real-life jungles of Vietnam that claimed plenty of lives without any help from the Vietnamese. But more than the war itself, the arc specifically draws influences from Vietnam War movies like Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, and, most importantly for our cases, Apocalypse Now. Fun fact, George Lucas himself was originally supposed to direct Apocalypse Now, but he decided to do Star Wars instead. Also, yes, I know that Apocalypse Now is itself based on the novel Heart of Darkness. I know all your trivia comments! The shots of dropships flying in is extremely evocative of the helicopter scene in Apocalypse Now, or the bombing runs by the clones, being similar to the napalm strikes in the movie. But the connections go beyond visual homage and into the core ethos of the episodes and the movie. Apocalypse Now is a very dense movie, especially if you watch the 3-hour version. It's a treatise on war, its effect on the soldier, and in turn the soldier's effect on the war. Captain Willard is sent deep into the Vietnamese jungle to find a rogue American colonel, Colonel Kurtz, who has by all reports gone completely insane and started some kind of cult. The movie is extremely good at the same thing the Clone Wars does, humanizing the soldier while at the same time showcasing the extreme violence of war, and the bizarre, surreal disconnect between the two. The most iconic scenes of the movie are mostly from when Willard and his ragtag crew travel with Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore and his flying cavalry. Kilgore treats war as a game. He sends his soldiers out to surf in the middle of a battle and orders a napalm strike because the mortar fire is disrupting the waves. He plays Fly of the Valkyries on a loudspeaker as his choppers roll in, to scare the locals off. He has completely disconnected the violence of his actions from the consequences, to the point that he doesn't even flinch at the mortar fire like everyone else does. He has made the battlefield his home. He's also funny, charismatic, and a good leader. His men respect him and he respects them. He's a lot like Anakin Skywalker, and that makes General Krell, or Colonel Kurtz. Kurtz is absolutely, undeniably insane. He beheads his enemies and displays them on pikes. He talks in vaguely incoherent monologues about the nature of violence and war. He explains that he has made a friend of horror, as any soldier must. The only way to win is to reject morality, reject judgment, reject humanity. One must embrace the horror of war if one is to win war. Krell is much the same. He has abandoned any semblance of nobility, any semblance of guilt or morality. He will do what it takes to win, because that attitude is the only way to win. And Krell does win his battles. It's noted that he's an unusually effective general. He just also usually has the highest casualties of all of them. But hey, that's the cost of war. One of Apocalypse Now's big questions is if there's really a meaningful difference between Kilgore's approach, treating war as a game in total denial of the consequences, and Kurtz's approach of embracing the consequences, reveling in the blood and viscera. These episodes ultimately seek to ask the same question between Anakin and Krell. Both stories are told from the perspective of the invader, and that's important because from the perspective of the invaded, there is no difference. One sword-wielding maniac is as dangerous as the other. Their approach is irrelevant because the result is the same. So, does conduct in war actually matter? Most people agree that the Vietnam War was bad. It's considered by most now, and many at the time, to be a civil war that the US inserted itself into for loose and vaguely imperialist reasons that ultimately resulted in years of fighting for absolutely no purpose because the US lost in the end anyway. It's also famous for being the first war that was widely televised, showing the folks back home, for the first time, the realities of war, not just the curated version of war that the government presented. What they saw wasn't pretty. US soldiers killing civilians, bombing the jungle with napalm, and then being gunned down by the hundreds, with absolutely no sign of progress towards victory. These atrocities are not unique to the Vietnam War. They're not unique to the American side of the Vietnam War. They, in a very real sense, are war. War itself is an atrocity. It is an act of mass violence, regardless of politics or motive or conduct. War is always an atrocity. Murder is a crime. Unless it's done by a soldier during war, then it's a duty and a moral imperative. To be a soldier is to live with this contradiction, and that's part of the reason it breaks so many people. Kurtz may be completely insane, but in between all his ramblings, he does make a few salient points.
We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write fuck on their airplane because it's obscene.
Let's get back to that opening quote. The wise man leads, the strong man follows. Here's a question. If we know the opening narration is misleading, why should we trust the quote? This is not the only questionable opening moral in a Clone Wars episode. I especially love this one from Season 5. Choose your enemies wisely, as they may be your last hope. The hell does that mean? Outside of the extremely specific circumstances that happen in that episode, absolutely nothing. In trying to figure out if the wise man quote has an origin, the only thing I found was this webpage by the Jedi Society of New Zealand. They collect all of these quotes as a series of Jedi precepts, general purpose nuggets of wisdom that a Jedi should live by. And I don't know how real this website is, and I don't care because that actually maps pretty perfectly to these quotes. Some of them make sense, some of them are worth preserving, but some of them are questionable and some of them are just plain wrong. Fear is a disease, hope is its only cure. For everything you gain, you lose something else. Truth can strike down the spectre of fear. It's so easy to imagine some war criminal like Ki-Adi-Mundi dropping one of these lines as a little nugget of wisdom that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, but it sure sounds profound, doesn't it? This is kind of core to the Jedi. Their belief system is fundamentally a bit weird and a bit wrong. Imagine instead that same quote being said in Marlon Brando's avant-garde drawl, and suddenly it makes more sense, right? Out of the mind of a madman.
The wise man leads, the strong man follows.
We're not talking about physical strength, we're talking about strength in the Nietzschean sense, the will to power, the wise, the strong. A strong soldier is a good soldier, and good soldiers are loyal. Good soldiers follow orders. Interestingly, the episode this quote is attached to is about the complete opposite. In this episode, 3 of the clones go rogue and disobey orders to instead pull off a daring mission to destroy a supply ship with stolen fighters. A move that ends up turning the tide of the entire battle in favour of the Republic, in a way that Krell's plan obviously never would have. They didn't lead or follow. The moral of the episode is that neither wise men or strong men follow, that the wise thing to do is question authority, that the strong thing to do is disobey orders that you know are wrong. It is the complete opposite of any interpretation of the supposed moral. So, maybe it's not a moral. Maybe it's a warning. Dogma is arguably the most important clone in the arc. Some clones choose their names, others are given one, and Dogma is clearly the latter. Dogma is dogmatic. He is the only clone in the battalion who is absolutely 100% loyal to Krell, regardless of how reckless his orders are or how likely he is to die because of them. If the strong man follows, then Dogma is a strong man indeed. He is the only clone willing to go through with Krell's orders to execute the supposed traitors. The only clone who unfailingly defends Krell against the other clone's accusations. The only clone willing to defend Krell even after his betrayal has been made entirely obvious. By strict military structure and code, he is a perfect soldier. This is what the whole system is designed to create. All of the clones are supposed to be Dogma, absolutely loyal, absolutely dependable, absolutely expendable. In Star Wars, they are literally clones, but modern militaries around the world are designed to break people down and turn them into clones, turn them into dogmas. Stories from military boot camps are never pretty, and that's because getting a person in a place where they're willing to kill another human without question is actually very difficult. You have to break a person down and drain them of their humanity to get them to that place. Captain Willard is our focal point character in Apocalypse Now, but in truth he doesn't really do much for most of the movie. The vast majority of shots of Willard are him with a 1,000-yard stare, completely disassociating from the world around him. He is a broken man, and that dissociation and brokenness is what keeps him alive for the whole movie while everyone else dies around him. Fives often argues that the clones are not droids, they are not just another number, they are not perfect soldiers. Because to be a perfect soldier is to lose your humanity, to become a droid. To not just hold a gun, but to be a gun, pointed in a direction by others.
The book says Captain...
I told you not to stop. Now let's go.
To truly break someone of their humanity, even a clone, is exceptionally difficult. And if you ever do manage it, that person will more than likely go completely insane. When he finally reaches Kurtz, Willard finds it hard to judge the man. He understands him too well because he too has made a friend of horror. The last assassin the US sent after Kurtz joined his cult. Willard nearly does too. He spends days with them before finally deciding to carry out his mission, to kill Kurtz, and in doing so, regain his humanity, to make an enemy of horror and see the atrocities for what they are. A lot of people argue that the Umbara arc pulls its punches at the end by revealing Krell to be a full-on bad guy whose plan is to betray the Republic and become Count Dooku's new apprentice. That it muddies all this discussion of morality and wartime and questioning authority with obvious good and evil, red versus blue villainy. But the problem with that reading is that it assumes that the Republic are the good guys, and that Krell's betrayal is wrong. Krell explains himself to the clones pretty clearly. He does not care about money or loyalty or ideology. He cares about winning. He had a vision of the Jedi's defeat, of darkness rising across the galaxy. And his desire to win at all costs trumps everything else. He's not a separatist, he's not a traitor in the traditional sense of the word. He's a traitor in the Colonel Kurtz sense of the word, breaking off from everyone to wage war in his own way. People will also often argue that Krell is a bad general, that his strategies are bad, but the man is a decorated war hero, just as Kurtz was. If you have an endless army of cheap disposable soldiers, then charging the front door with overwhelming force is a completely legitimate strategy. It's just one that assumes that soldiers are the inhuman weapons they're supposed to be, not the people they actually are. The fact that Krell was deliberately trying to get his troops killed this time is irrelevant because Krell has always been like this. His casualties have always been high. The reason nobody notices that this time it's on purpose is that Krell is not a bad general. He is in fact a better general than most Jedi because he too has made a friend of horror. The wise man leads, and Krell is certainly wise, but not wise enough. When they finally capture him, mostly through luck and a bit of quick thinking, the clones agree that Krell is too dangerous to be left alive. He has to die. But no matter which way you cut it or how desensitized to it you are, there is a difference between shooting a man on the battlefield and shooting a man in the back of the head. For the real dangers that there is in leaving Krell alive, an execution is always, at least in some part, about revenge. And for how much he hates Krell, Rex still hesitates to do it. Rex retains his humanity, he retains his morals, he retains his hesitation to kill. And in the end, it's not Rex who pulls the trigger, it's Dogma. Like Willard killing Kurtz, this is Dogma's redemption, an act of pure passion to regain his humanity. To reject horror and pain and be a person again. For Rex, it would be inhuman. For Dogma, it's the only human thing left to do. Isn't that a contradiction? It sure is. Such is the realities of war. When you live every day with a gun in your hand, morality and ethics become a lot more flexible. Rex and Dogma sit on two sides of a line, and either way you cross, killing Krell is the threshold. In the end, Fives announces celebratorily that they've done it, they've taken Umbara. But Rex doesn't celebrate. He asks what it was all for. All this death and darkness. What did it really accomplish in the end? Nobody has an answer, because there is no answer. Whether they were shooting Umbarans or shooting each other really made no difference in the end. The only thing that's changed is that there's now more dead people, and a victory that will bring about even more dead people.
What's the point of all this? I mean, why?
I don't know, sir. I don't think anybody knows. But I do know that someday this war is gonna end. Then what? We're soldiers. What happens to us then?
Francis Ford Coppola has stated that he doesn't really view Apocalypse Now as an anti-war film. That a true anti-war film wouldn't have any war in it at all. It would be about love and friendship, and it wouldn't have any guns or any explosions in it at all. And he has a point. For all of its obvious anti-war imagery and ideas, Apocalypse Now has still been co-opted by pro-military types as some sort of inspirational badassery. Particularly the scenes with Kilgore and his flying cavalry. He is simply too badass to be anti-war, even as he surfs over the blood of innocent villages. Instead, Coppola has said that he views the movie as an anti-lie movie, the lie being that war and morality can ever coexist. Turning a man into a soldier is an immoral act regardless of your method or your motive. Even if your cause is just, and it usually isn't, there is no nobility to be found in war, only unrelenting madness. That's what makes Umbara dark. It's not the violence, it's the suggestion that the violence is meaningless. That it's not noble or for the greater good, it's just violence. The characters ask if it was all worth it in the end, and the answer is obviously no. They shouldn't be here. But being here is the only reason they exist. It's bleak, and it's sad, and it's hopeless, and it's war, and it's true.